My name is Ivan, or also Ivan Bondarenko. I'm a recent addition to Accelerant Research as a VP of Client Solutions, and it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Lori Walker, who is a Customer Insights Master Moderator in Doctoral Studies at Capella University. Her topic will be sharing insights regarding emotional intelligence in the workplace. Sounds exciting, and I can't wait to hear about it. And I leave it all to you, Lori.
Thanks, Yvonne. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to be talking about emotional intelligence at work and a little bit more about my background. I am also an MMR graduate from a long time ago at a different university, so I can attest to the value of that degree if anybody has any questions about that. So today I'm going to be talking about emotional intelligence at work. Get the screen going here. So emotional intelligence, what is it? Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've read about it. Most people agree that it has 4 components. So we're going to talk about each of these and some strategies for each of these components. So first of all, self-awareness is the ability to identify and manage your own emotions as well as the emotions of others. The second component is self-management. So this means the ability to use the awareness of your emotions to stay flexible, manage your reactions and the situations that you come up with and the people you interact with. Social awareness is your ability to pick up the emotions of others and listen and observe and then react and interact. Relationship management, the last component, is the ability to use your own and others' emotions to manage your interactions successfully. So EQ, or emotional intelligence, can be improved over time, unlike your IQ, which does not change. So the good news is that you can get better at this. You can look at some of these strategies that I'll be talking about today and adapt them into your own life, even into your own, the way you conduct research, the way you interact with your teammates, etc. I'll tell you about a book in a little bit that has 17 strategies for each one of these components. Now, I do not have time to go over all of them, but I'm going to highlight what I think are the foundational strategies for each component. So, but first, let's think about a typical meeting that you might be in. Could be virtual, could be in person. Let's look at a typical sales meeting. You might be reviewing everybody's numbers and a goal. You might do a little team building exercise that doesn't really go into much depth, doesn't have a lot of interaction. You might have some training, but since it's maybe just listening to a talking head like me today, you don't get to interact and you don't really learn anything. And maybe there's some brainstorming. But if you apply some of the things that we're going to talk about today, your effective sales meeting could look like this. First of all, there's no distractions because everybody has put away their phone and put away their devices and they're paying attention. Everybody's in this moment. You sent out a preset agenda and we're going to go through it exactly as it is. The first thing we're going to talk about is, what are we doing right? What are those success stories that we should share and celebrate? And then you move on maybe to one thing to learn, right? A concept that we're going to learn, and we learn it by role playing and practicing it so that everybody can kind of immerse themselves and actually learn something. And then you debrief after to say what we learned. And you can also learn from other people on what they learned. And then we are going to take an opportunity to talk about learnings. We embrace mistakes and we learn from them. So we're going to talk about how can we do better next time. And then there's some check-ins for accountability. So you can see that when you apply these things to a meeting, it can be much more interesting. You can learn more and you build the camaraderie of your team. So let's dig into each component. Now, I'm a 30-some year researcher, so I'm going to talk about how I apply these things to my research career as well. But really, no matter what role or function you have, especially if you're a team leader, these can apply to you. So in the first component, which is self-awareness, you really need a foundation to help you. And again, there's so many strategies that we could cover, but I think these are the three most important ones. And that is learning to recognize your emotions. And this is really about taking time to notice what you're feeling, to stop, think about it, to breathe, and reflect for a moment. And this all happens pretty fast once you get good at it. You recognize that emotion and you ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What am I feeling? You learn how to name it, and then you identify why you think you're feeling that way, and then you proceed, maybe breathe a few times, and then you can deal with your emotion. And so here are some resources that I would recommend. Brene Brown, if you've read Atlas of the Heart, she talks about, I think it's 80 something different emotions and the differences between them. And yes, that is the kind of information you need to learn to recognize your emotions. And the two other books near the top here by Susan David and Mark Brackett, they explain exactly what this is: learning to recognize, learning to name it, giving yourself permission to feel that emotion, understanding why you have it. All of that is very important to building your self awareness. And I'll talk a little bit more about this other book here. So, the next component is self management. So, once you've recognized that emotion in yourself, you got to think about what are you going to what happened to cause that emotion. So in order to be the most optimal human being that you can, we have to give our brain and physiology the best that we can as a human. And that means some things that you might not think are related, but are related to managing your emotions. And first and foremost is sleep hygiene. So that means enough sleep and quality sleep. And after I read this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, no relation, uh, I immediately tried to figure out how to get better sleep. Now, if you're a person who has kids under 10, I feel for you because it is very hard to get sleep, but it's about prioritizing and making sure that you prioritize your time in the right way. So sleep hygiene is critical for your brain function, and that brain function is critical to managing your emotions, as is smiling and laughing more. Now, if you don't get enough smiling and laughing in your life, there's probably ways that you can do that even without needing to have a sense of humor all the time. I get my laughs and smiles by listening to funny books or watching funny things on TV. So even if you do more of that, it's been proven to help your brain function. The next thing is to take control of your self-talk. So this book here by Kendra Hall, Choose Your Story, Choose Your Life, it's about taking the self-talk, that is the conversations that you're having in your head, and turning them in such a way that it helps you instead of hurts you. So instead of saying, I can't do this or I am bad at that, you take that story and turn it around. So taking control of that self talk is extremely important in managing your emotions. There's some other books here by Ryan Holiday. You'll see Ego is the Enemy, Obstacles Away, Stillness is the Key. All of these books are about identifying your values, living your values, and then making sure that you can focus on what you need to focus on based on what you think is important. So, for example, in my life, curiosity drives just about everything. And so I use that to for example, when I post on LinkedIn, it's about things that I'm curious about. And that's what drives me. It's the value of curiosity is what drives me, not the need to compare myself to someone else or the need for likes and shares and things like that. I don't really pay attention to that after reading all of these books. It's all about what's important to you and are you living that value. The next thing is that we have to accept change. And I don't know anybody who loves change. Not too many people do. Most people have a reaction to it. And what we want to get to the point where is that we accept change. And in order to do that, we have to have our brain chemistry and body optimize, but it's also about learning to diagnose the emotions that are going on in your brain when when something hits you. So if you think it's going to be a bad thing, you really don't know that until more time has passed, right? Even if it's a good thing that's happened, you really don't know if it's going to be a good thing until more time has passed. So really, it could be good, it could be bad. You just have to wait. And in the meantime, you just deal with it. And that's one of the main things I learned from that book that was on the previous slide called Positive Psychology. So, or the topic was positive psychology. So, and also the main thing we want to do with our brain is have a mindset of learning. We can learn a lesson from anything and everybody, is my philosophy. And so you got to get curious and ask the right questions and make sure that when bad things happen, we learn from them and we learn how to avoid that in the future or just deal with it better in the future. So the next component is social awareness. And here's some foundational skills. So I read a story from one of the books that I read. So this is an example of someone who was displaying an emotion and no one asked her about it. So this is a story of a Black woman. And if you read some reading about that, you know that sometimes people with darker skin have uh, other people have trouble reading their face. So here's a Black woman whose mom literally passed away that morning, and she came into work and they noticed that she wasn't smiling. And instead of asking her, "What's going on? Are you okay?" all they did was ask her to smile more. And she was just beside herself, struggling to get through work, but literally nobody asked her about what's going on and are you okay? And so you want to get to the point where you recognize people's faces and body language so that you can ask a question, right? A lot of us are researchers. Your superpower of asking questions and asking good questions is one of the main strategies that you need to manage your emotions. So that's good. So we've got to learn to read people, to read the room, to notice body language, to notice expressions, but you also have to know someone well enough to know that there's something going on. So there's a few resources here that I want to mention. What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro is a really great book to understand body language. And he's like a former FBI interrogator or something like this, but his job was to try to find people who are lying. And so the moral of the story is you're almost never going to be able to tell when someone's lying, but you can observe their expressions and body language and things that they say to ask more questions, to extract more information, to figure out what's going on. So use them as clues to see what's going on. Another really great book to build that skill is Never Split the Difference. Even though it's a book about negotiating, it's one of the best I've read. It's about listening, it's about learning to ask the right question, learning to how to ask the right questions. And so it's a really great book to help build that skill. Another strategy for building social awareness is being a good listener. Now, as a master moderator, I thought I was a really good listener, but once I read this book, You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy, it really digs into what does it really mean to listen. So if you want to be a bad listener, do things like interrupt all the time, respond vaguely to someone because you're not really listening, or look at your phone while they're talking, or fidget, shift around a lot, or make assumptions because you think you know better, or you're always thinking about what you're going to say next. If you're one of those people, that's not being a good listener. And I'll talk a little bit more about the things that you should be doing to be a good listener. And the next thing is empathy. I know as researchers, we try to create or start with empathy anytime we do a research project, right? And I thought I was a very empathetic person. But after I read this book, Tell Me More About That by Rob Volpe, he really displays empathy and it's really all about setting aside the judgment, setting aside the assumptions, and just asking really good questions. A lot of these books have that in common. Ask really good questions. And as researchers, we should be really good at that, right? So the next thing is what I call testing for accuracy. So that's from Never Split the Difference. It's getting to the point where you're listening and you're hearing what's going on, and you say, well, it seems like XYZ is happening. So you're testing that you understood, you heard them. And then when you get that yes, then you're like, okay, I got it. So now I can move on with my negotiation or whatever else that I'm doing. And so all of these things are great for building social awareness, but also they make us better researchers too. And the power of observation. Again, body language, expressions, reading the room, using your observation skills is super critical. And the last resource here is a book called Ditch the Pitch, which is is really about letting go of your agenda and just listening and then responding to that person. And I'll give you a really good example. I just finished reading this book and I was doing a one-on-one interview, and because I am a master moderator, I've been taught to uh she calls it eat the guide and then burp the questions. It sounds really silly, but basically that means know your guide so well that you don't have to look at it. Well, that's what I did. I let go of it. I asked my first and only question, and then I just let the conversation go where it was going. And then at the end, I said, I need just a minute to look at my guide to make sure I covered everything. And sure enough, I had. So I just let it go. And it was one of the most wonderful interviews I did. So it really does work, letting go, but also understanding what your objective is so that you don't forget anything, right? Don't forget to cover anything. Oh my goodness, sorry. I went ahead. The fourth component is relationship strategies. So as researchers, we are trained to ask really good questions, right? So we're already open, we're already curious. If you're not, here's some ways that you can build up that skill. Um, I already talked about never split the difference. Uh, Beginners and a curious mind. Beginners is about having a mindset that you are not too old to learn something. You can uh, no matter where you are in life, you if you choose to learn about something new, you can do that and have that mindset. So another way to look at that as open and curious is this Curious Mind, this movie producer. He made it a point to talk to an interesting person once a week. So for 30 years, he had conversations once a week with, because he was a famous producer, he could talk to those people, but you could do that in your life. I do that right now. Try to talk to someone at least once a week. He's getting ideas. You could be connecting dots that you hadn't thought about before. So it's important to talk to people from different areas. So even though you're in the grocery business, maybe you want to talk to people who are not in the grocery business to get different ideas, because when you have two different disciplines and you bring them together, that's where innovation happens. The next thing that you would need to work on to build relationship strategies is learning to take feedback well. Um, if you're like me, feedback sometimes doesn't feel too good, but have a curious mind, ask good questions, and just listen. And then also when you give feedback, try to do it in the most respectful way. You Most people give feedback because they want things to get better, right? So be listening for the lessons learned and how you can get better. Building trust is just about being authentic and having those conversations where you could speak freely. Radical Candor is a great book for that, especially if you're a manager. And then tackling tough conversations. So all of the resources that I mentioned can help you do that. So, and then as researchers, we all take pride on asking good questions, but my question to you is, do you take that to other parts of your life, to home, to other teams, etc. Think about how you can be the best question asker on your team. So now, what does it look like if you take all these strategies? What does emotional intelligence look like at work? Well, it means that you are going to notice when something is going on with a coworker, and that means you have to know them well enough to do that, right? You're paying attention to body language, to faces, like when you're presenting. Do people have a puzzled look on their face or or are they nodding? So you want to watch for those little expressions and body language, etc. You got to be able to read the room, especially when you're presenting. If you're presenting in person, I know that's harder to do when you're virtual, but if you're allowed to see the faces, which I love to do when I'm presenting virtually, hopefully you can notice that. You are anticipating questions because you're reading the room and because you're paying attention to faces. You hopefully can anticipate questions that might come up and be ready for them. And you're also going to ask good questions. So keep digging. If someone brings up something, it's because they have a something that didn't quite uh, come through. So keep going until everybody has been heard, and you keep digging. And then you've if you read that book, Never Split the Difference, it's going to help you in just about every part of your life, because negotiations are just conversations, right? You could be, I'm sure parents out there have been negotiating with their kids, as little as 3 and 4 years old. They come back with things that you're like, whoa, where did you learn that, right? So you could even use good negotiation skills in, for example, a salary negotiation. I actually did this in a previous role where I knew what my salary should be because I did my research, and I knew based on my location and my experience and my education what it should be. And when they presented me with a number, I was like, saying to myself, that doesn't make a lot of sense. What should I do? And so I was thinking, I just got to ask a good question. So what's the best question I could ask? So I just said, so that's a little different than what my research showed. So how did you come up with that number? And so then we proceeded to have a good conversation. So my thing is, like, if all else fails, just ask a really good question. It gets you out of trouble. It has gotten me out of trouble a lot. If you can, be in the moment and don't take notes at meetings. I know that sounds crazy, but if you are running a meeting, I know that it's very hard to follow an agenda and run a meeting and take notes and keep time. So if you can, ask somebody to help you take notes, keep time, and just be in the moment and really listen to people. Sometimes what I do, if a meeting was recorded, I will just go back and, like, right after the meeting, take all the notes that I remember and then watch it in high speed and make sure I didn't miss anything, but try to be in the moment. And lastly, act like a partner, not a vendor. So what does that mean? That means my goals are your goals are my goals. We work together instead of you taking orders or me giving you orders. So just have a different kind of mindset, listen what's going on. You got to know what the objectives are. So that's really what it means. Act like a partner, not a vendor. So we've talked about a lot of habits, and this book, Emotional Intelligence Habit, as I mentioned, has 17 strategies for each of the four components. So I've talked about a few of them, but I'll talk a few more and how they might apply to your research life if you are a researcher. Because like Karen Lee, I'm also a research nerd. I get very excited when we talk about customer insights and things like that. So emotional intelligence habits are really about building your optimal brain chemistry and your optimal physiology so that you're at peak performance, so that you can be ready for emotion management. Because most of the time what your brain is trying to do is hijack your emotions are really just a hijack of your brain so that you can't can't think straight. So a lot of these books that I've mentioned, they talk about learning to prevent the hijack. And so a lot of these strategies are trying to help you do that. So one of them is appreciating what you have. You've heard this, have an attitude of gratitude. Well, it's been shown that if you say things and appreciate, say gratitude type statements throughout your day, it actually does improve your ability to handle things and your emotional intelligence. So it's a really simple thing that you could do to build that habit. The next thing is positive thoughts and thinking. You've heard of affirmations maybe like I got this, or you wake up in the morning and you say I'm going to have a good day. Well, it's been proven that you will have a better day if you actually do that. So these are some things that you could do that literally don't cost anything. Something else is avoid worrying about the future. So avoid asking what if. That's really great if you are a, what do you call it, a risk manager. That's your job, right? But most of us should not worry about things that haven't happened until they happen. So you can certainly plan for the risk, but it's been proven that worrying about the future, it doesn't optimize your brain chemistry. So the better thing to do is appreciate what you have and just be in the moment and be here now, right? The other thing is that we have to disconnect every once in a while. Put that phone away, put that laptop away, just be with your own thoughts. However you can do that, it's been proven to help you. Limit caffeine intake. I know that might be challenging for some people, but you've got to figure out the optimal time to stop having caffeine, whether that's 12 noon or 3 p.m., whatever it is. If you aren't sleeping well, this could be one of the reasons that you aren't. And speaking of good sleep, enough sleep, that is something that I used to be one of those people that got less than 6 hours. And after reading that book, believe me, you want to get more than 6 hours. You want to get at least 7. And yes, I do get more than 7. And it's taken work. It's taken 3 to 4 years of work to have the schedule that I want to have and get enough sleep. As I mentioned before, the stories you tell yourself. So reframing your perspective when you think something is bad, turning it around and just talking about, sure, it is the silver lining kind of perspective, but it's been proven that this does help your brain chemistry, as does breathing. Even just taking 2 minutes before you have a meeting or something like that to breathe, it helps you. It helps your brain. Another thing is learn to say no. So you've heard the word boundaries, right? Have your boundaries and stick to them. I I don't do things in the evening because it interferes with my sleep, right? So the most important thing that you can do for your sleep habit is to go to bed at the same time every day. And so when there's a disruption in that schedule, I've learned there's a heavy price to pay. So I just have to learn to say no to things most of the time during the week. That's something that I've chosen to do. In this book, there's ways to neutralize toxic people. I don't have time to talk about that today, but there's a lot of good ways to do that if you're facing someone who's toxic in your life, how to deal with them. But more importantly, you know, maybe it's time to walk away from that relationship. Next up is don't hold grudges, right? The only thing that does is help the other person occupy space in your brain, which is not good. It's been proven that it's bad for your brain, bad for your physiology as well. So just figure out how to let it go. Practicing mindfulness has really helped me to well, I prefer to think of it more as a brain break. So 10 to 12 minutes a day, taking a break in the afternoon, it helps me reset for the rest of the day and kind of clear out my mind. And it's been shown that this really does help you manage your emotions. Over time, your brain gets better at managing emotions and stopping that hijack that I talked about. Structuring free time is something that you will have to learn how to do if you want to make time for the things that are important for you. And the best way to do that is to look at your schedule, take a hard look at how you spend your time, If you find that you are scrolling forever on one of these or sitting in front of the TV and that's not the best use of your time, there's ways to help that. I think I showed a book that was about building habits. Maybe some of you have read Atomic Habits. I actually got more out of the book called Tiny Habits. And so it helped me understand, how to look at the schedule. What do you want to put in there? And then ways to make it happen, even if it's in little increments. Structuring your free time just means like if I want to be a person who reads books, I got to make time to read books, right? Or if I want to be a person who wants to learn how to surf, I've got to make time for that thing that I want to learn. And so that's what it means is to be intentional about how you structure your free time. And I've talked about asking lots of questions and good questions. It is definitely a skill that helps you uh, relate to people in your job. It helps you get past situations that might be full of tension. So it's all the resources that I talked about are about how to be a really good question asker. Also, when you're talking to someone, put away your phone. When you're in a meeting, put away your phone. We have a rule in my house that you are not allowed to pick this up if you're talking to somebody unless you say exactly what you're looking up and it's part of the conversation. Greet people by name. So it's a very little thing that can help you improve your relationships with people, but also uh, it for me who has trouble remembering people's names, you got to say it like 3 times to help remember. It helps me remember. I already mentioned smiling and laughing as much as you can. If you don't have smiling and laughter in your life, you can make it watching funny things, listening to funny things. The other thing is don't seek attention. As I talked about, living your values. If you are living your values, you should not seek the attention. You shouldn't need the attention of other people, and you shouldn't need to compare yourself to other people to feel good about what you're doing because you're living your values. So, a lot of the books that I've mentioned talk about just keep your head down and keep working, and you'll get there. You don't need other people's approval. Platinum Rule just says treat people how they want to be treated. But in order to do that, you've got to know them very well, right? So that's just conversations, getting to know people and how they work, how they communicate, etc. It's paying attention, it's asking questions. Again, paying attention to body language and expressions and things like this, and then asking good questions. And also turn off your inner voice. It's really critical if you're trying to improve your listening skills, you've got to actually listen and turn off that inner voice when people are talking. So those are some of the habits that I've brought forth there. And again, there's 17 strategies in this book, but if you apply those things, here's what your day might look like. And it's not just dealing with emotions, it's preparing your body and your brain to be the best that it can be. You're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. You're saying positive things to yourself, like pop out of bed and say, I'm going to have a great day. And I will. Exercise is part of your routine. It's not something that gets pushed aside because of other things. So for me, I do that first thing in the morning so that it can't get pushed away. So it's built in. You're eating healthy, right? You're making the good choices. It's been shown that if you are optimizing your sleep and optimizing your brain chemistry, you will make better choices. And some of those choices might be having to do with picking the healthier option than the junk food option. So it's amazing how all of these things work together so that you can be the optimal human being that you want to be. Again, taking 10 to 12 minutes to reset your brain or meditate, whatever you want to call it. I set a timer and I just try to blank out my brain, and it usually doesn't work because people that meditate know you just start over. You catch yourself and you start over. And there's no good and bad ways to do meditation. Just sit down. You may or may not close your eyes, but set a timer and then you can just let your mind go. And of course, practicing attitude, being thankful, thankful for everything you have. So you're also a person that sets boundaries. So you say no sometimes, but you also tell people what you need, but not why you need it. So for example, if I'm a dyslexic, I just say, you might see some typos in this because I'm a really bad speller, or I can't I need less light in my office, or you don't say why you need it. You just say, I need, okay? Talk about what you need. Again, asking good questions is probably the key to life. If you remember anything from this presentation, remember that, and being a good listener. The other thing is stop making judgments about people or situations because you don't know if those situations are good or bad. Circumstances happen, problems happen. One of the books I read said everybody's got problems, right? You want to trade them up for good problems and the better problems, etc. So you're never going to get away from problems. Learn how to use your emotions to deal with them. You live in the present. You've got a nighttime routine to wind down. About an hour or so before you go to bed, you're limiting your social media. You're putting away your phone. You're not looking at it. You don't pick it up because it's not. Don't keep it by the nightstand. If you're using it for an alarm, put it far enough away that you got to get out of bed because you do not want to wake up in the middle of the night and look at your phone. Absolutely not. That's really bad for sleep hygiene. So that's what it could look like when you're being an embracer in your work life. And this is my last slide. So if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the chat. In your work life as a researcher, it's super important to recognize the emotions of others and also on the people that you work with on your teams, even your manager. Pay attention to expressions, right? And use that as a clue to ask a good question. Like, okay, I'm seeing something, I'm seeing something. What can I ask about that? Because obviously there's something there this person isn't telling me. So ask a respectful question. You're also running a distraction-free meeting. You're asking people to put away their devices and be here in the present. Maybe your meetings run shorter because you do that, right? You embrace mistakes as learning and you dig into lessons learned. I personally feel like any kind of big project or even big meeting, you should always have a meeting afterward to talk about what did we learn, what could we do better next time. You want to create the environment where people feel free to speak up. So embracing mistakes as learning instead of disciplining people is always the way to go if you're trying to create a safe place to speak up. We always want to celebrate successes, right? Celebrate hard, I always say. And then if someone is displaying emotions, you want to ask them, is everything okay? What's going on? Or if they're super happy when they come in, it's like, oh, what's going on today? Just ask a friendly question. But most importantly, listening is really the key to most of this. Listen with the goal of understanding, not just responding. You should not be thinking about what you're going to say next. Remember, go with the flow, ditch the pitch, listen to understand, and then respond with a thoughtful question. So don't think about what you're going to say next. Don't interrupt. Be patient and non judgmental. Remember, if you stop judging and assuming things about people, I guarantee you your life is going to get better. So think about what's the next good question you can ask to confirm your understanding. So that is the end of my slides.
Lori, thank you so much. This has been really insightful. Your strategies, it's very interesting, eye-opening. I personally can use these in my everyday life, have in the past, a lot of what you put in here. Um, so let me remind our audience, so please put any questions in the chat or Q&A. And while we wait for any questions to pop up, let me ask a quick question to you, Lori. So with the shift in our workplace from in-person to the virtual, what are some of the components that you see that may have improved or not due to our working at home over the past over years?
Well, I personally experienced that shift and worked two different roles on the virtual side. And we noticed that there was definitely some things that were different. It is harder to make connections to people. It absolutely is. You have to pay more attention to people's expressions because it's going to be harder to see the rest of their body language, right?
Mhm.
So some of the things that we did is that we started to have once a month sessions where we uh just got together to talk about anything we wanted to. So that's something that you could do to help connect your team. Connections are harder, so you have
Mhm.
to work a lot harder to get people in the right environment to talk about that. Usually, you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and you don't have time. And another thing that we did is like when you're waiting for a few people to come, I used to be in the mindset of, you know what, we're going to start on time with whoever's here. And, for different reasons, people are a few minutes late, whatever. It's fine. Use that time to get to know people, have 2 or 3 minutes of chit chat instead of
Sure.
just plowing to the next meeting. But you also have to be ready that your meeting might get cut short. So, you know, but that you have to come up with creative ways for making connections. And I think the other thing is that I'm studying something called psychological safety for my doctorate degree, and it is very difficult to achieve for everybody for different reasons. There's a lot of reasons why women don't speak up. There's a lot of reasons why people of color don't speak up. There's a lot of reasons why people like me, like an introvert, don't speak up. The manager, the leader, has got to take responsibility for drawing out everybody. And so, like I talked about today, you've got to be the best question asker in the world to help people feel safe, to help people bring their ideas. You don't want to walk away from all that innovation and creativity, and you don't want it to be because people don't feel comfortable speaking up. And so as a
Mhm.
leader, you've got to work really hard to get people in that comfort zone. And the way you do that is mistakes are okay. You don't scold people. You welcome lessons learned. It's making sure that all the people are contributing. It's making sure the introverts have the agenda ahead of time so we have time to think. It's all these things that create that safe safe zone to speak up.
Oh, absolutely. Everything you're saying right there is so important. Listening. The one emotion that stuck out to me is empathy that you mentioned, and we don't see that enough in the workplace amongst leaders as well as within teams. So if we could be more empathetic, that definitely is a big emotion to work on. Um, Jessica has a comment. She mentioned this topic is so important for networking and just being a good team player in a professional setting. Soft skills like this matter long term, and it builds rapport amongst us all. We care about each other.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. As I mentioned, I thought I was really empathetic. I even thought of myself as an empath. I definitely absorb other people's emotions, which can be a bit of a downer sometimes, but it just means that I have to work on controlling that so that I don't get really, really upset. But yeah, making
Mhm.
connections, having empathy. I would highly recommend that book I mentioned because I thought I was really empathetic and a good question asker. And Rob Volpage he's the most empathetic person I know, and I learned a lot from him. So yeah, I would say the best thing you can do is just ask a really good question when you see somebody who might be struggling.
Yep, absolutely. And any question, from your team, there's no wrong question. It's all questions are good. When you're brainstorming, everything counts. So I totally agree there. Um, while we wait for any other questions from anybody, one thing that's helped me in the past too is listening to certain psychology speakers that use psychology as their basis. I don't know, some people don't really listen to him, but I like Tony Robbins because he does tap into how your brain works and um, kind of giving yourself a way to just prime yourself for different different types of situations. Much of the strategies that you put in there are touched on, and I really loved everything that you put in there. There's a lot more, so I can't wait to read some of your materials as well.
For sure. A lot of the books that I've read, they always start out with the psychology of your brain, the chemistry of your brain. And so you hear it and you hear it, you hear it over and over again. You finally go, okay, I get it. And yeah, so I'm sure a lot of books have the same kind of strategies. And yes, I've read things over and over and over in different books and even books by someone else named Mel Robbins. I've read a couple of her books and talks about the same things over and over and over. And really, if you just embrace those few strategies, you're gonna be a really good question asker and emotion manager.
Right. One quick little suggestion to anybody out there that I incorporated within my teams in the past was during COVID of creating a virtual coffee pot or
Hmm.
water cooler, just a little discussion because you miss that non-business kind of interaction where you could just like have a quick conversation on, what's the latest in March Madness, which by the way started today, or whatever. And that just builds another level of trust and care about each other.
Hmm. One thing we did recently is I would have those virtual coffee chats or whatever and ask people to answer with a picture or a GIF. And so, like, what's your favorite food? And, put a picture instead of typing things. And so
Hmm.
or where's your favorite vacation spot? And it got conversations going because then people could ask, well, what's going on in that picture? Tell me about
Hmm.
your vacation that you loved or whatever. And it really got conversations going. And you get to know your coworkers uh, at the same time. So it's kind of win-win.
Yep. Deeper level. I love it. All right. Any other thoughts or last comments or questions, anybody? All right. Well, we're basically at the end of this presentation. I want to thank Lori Walker for her time. Thank you so much for sharing this phenomenal presentation. And I'm going to take a lot of this to my personal use in my business, and I want to share with my insights community. Thank you for being part of our virtual insights community conference and helping to make this a successful platform.